Hello everyone, myself Mrs.S.Nusrath Najeeba, Assistant Professor, Department of Computer Science SF, the Standard Fireworks Rajaratnam College for Women, Swahasi. In this video lesson, we are going to learn about database architecture and design. These are the contents that we are going to cover in this video. First of all, we are going to see the introduction for a database and its architecture. Then we are going to see about the types, and then one-tier architecture, two-tier architecture and three-tier architecture. Let's get into the video. A database, it is an organized collection of data that's stored electronically, designed for efficient storage, retrieval and management of information. It is a structured way to store data, allowing users to access, update and manipulate the information. This data may contain text, number, images and more. Databases are managed using specialized software known as Database Management System, that is DBMS, which facilitates the storage, retrieval and manipulation of data. To say exactly, databases are fundamental to modern computing, supporting various applications across different sectors. Database architecture defines how users interact with the database to read, write or update information. A well-designed architecture and a schema, that is a blueprint detailing tables, fields and relationships, ensure data consistency that improves the performance and keeps the data secured. These are the types of the database architecture, that is one-tier architecture, two-tier architecture, three-tier architecture. In one-tier, server and client will be there. In two-tier, there will be a database tier and client tier. And in three-tier, there is an intermediate layer called application. Let's see in detail. This is the one-tier architecture. In this, we can see there is a database and an application. The communication will be between these two. In one-tier architecture, the user works directly with the database on the same system. This means the client, server and database are all in one application. The user can open the application, interact with the data and perform tasks without needing a separate server or network connection. A common example to be said is Microsoft Excel. Everything from the user interface to the logic and data storage happens on the same device. The user enters data, performs calculations and saves files directly on their computer. This setup is simple and easy to use, making it ideal for personal or standalone application. It does not require a network or complex setup, which is why it's often used in small scale or individual use cases. This architecture is simple and works well for personal standalone application where no external server or network connection is needed. These are the advantages and disadvantages of one-tier architecture. The first advantage is simple architecture. One-tier architecture is the most simple architecture to set up, as only a single machine is required to maintain it. The second advantage is cost effective. As we can see, there is no need for an additional hardware is required for implementing one-tier architecture, which makes it cost effective and it is easy to implement. It can be deployed and hence it is mostly used in small projects. The disadvantages are, there are 4 disadvantages of one-tier architecture. The first one is limited to single user. Only one person can use the application at a time. It's not designed for multiple users or teamwork. Then poor security. Since everything is on the same machine, if someone gets access to the system, they can access both the data and the application easily. There is no centralized control for this. That is the third disadvantage. Data is stored locally, as we see before, so there is no central database. This makes it harder to manage or pack up data across multiple devices. Last one is hard to share data. Sharing data between users is difficult because everything is stored on one computer. The next architecture is the two-tier architecture. In this we can see there is a client and a server. In this, client has user and an application, and in server has a database system. They both are connected through a network. Let's see in detail. The two-tier architecture is similar to a basic client-server model. The application at the client end directly communicates with the database on the server side that uses APIs like ODBC, JDBC are used for this interaction. The server side is responsible for providing query processing and transaction management functionalities. On the client side, the user interfaces and application programs are run. The application on the client side establishes a connection with the server side to communicate with the DBMS. For example, a library management system used in schools or small organization is a classic example of two-tier architecture. In this, the tier 1 will be the client layer. This is the user interface that library staffs or users interact with. For example, they might use a desktop application to search for books, issue them or check due dates. The second tier will be the database layer. The database server stores all the library records such as book details, user information and transaction log. The client layer sends a request like searching for a book to the database layer, processes it and sends back the result. This separation allows the client to focus on the user interface while the server handles data storage and retrieval. These are the advantages and disadvantages of two-tier architecture. There are 5 advantages of two-tier architecture. The first and most important advantage is it is easy to access. That makes easy access to the database, which makes fast retrieval. The second advantage is scalable. We can scale the database easily by adding clients or upgrading hardware. The third advantage is low cost. That is, two-tier architecture is cheaper than the three-tier architecture and multi-tier architecture. The fourth advantage will be the easy deployment. Since it is easier to deploy than three-tier architecture, it is simple and easily understandable because of only 2 components. While talking about the disadvantages, there are 4 disadvantages. First one is the limited scalability. As the number of user increases, the system performance can slow down because the server gets overloaded with too many requests. Then security issues. Clients connect directly to the database, which can make the system more vulnerable to attacks or data leaks. Then the third disadvantage is the tight coupling. The client and server are closely linked. If the database changes, the client application often needs to be updated too. The fourth one is the difficult maintenance. That is, managing updates, fixing bugs or adding features become harder when the number of users or system increases. Next, three-tier architecture. In this three-tier architecture, we can see that the client has user and an application client. The server also has application server and database management system. While seeing in two-tier architecture, in the client side only there will be application. On comparing with this, the three-tier architecture has application for the server also. Since both two-tier and three-tier are connected through the network. Let's see in detail about three-tier architecture. In three-tier architecture, there is another layer between the client and the server. The client does not directly communicate with the server. Instead, it interacts with an application server which further communicates with the database system, and then the query processing and transaction management takes place. This immediate layer acts as a medium for the exchange of partially processed data between the server and the client. This type of architecture is used in the case of large web applications. The best example for this architecture is e-commerce tool. In this, there are 3 phases we can see: user, processing and database. In user, you can visit an online store, search for a product and add it to your cart. Then processing. The system checks if the product is in stock, calculates the total price and applies any discounts. Then database. The product details, your cart and order history are stored in the database for future reference. This is a real-time example for 3-tier architecture. While ordering in Amazon or Flipkart, the user sees the products that are available. That is the user face here. After that, we will add any product to our cart. Once the product is added to our cart, it will be processed. That is, it will be checked in the database that whether it is an out of stock or we are having stock and all, that is the process. And final database. If we ordered the product, once the cart is filled after out for delivery, the database will be updated and the stocks are updated in the database. These are the advantages and disadvantages of 3-tier architecture. There are 3 main advantages of 3-tier architecture. The first main advantage is enhanced scalability. Scalability is enhanced due to the distributed deployment of application servers. Now, individual connections need not to be made between the client and the server. The second advantage is data integrity. 3-tier architecture maintains data integrity. Since there is a middle layer between the client and the server, data corruption can be avoided or it may be removed. The third one is the security. 3-tier architecture improves security. This type of model prevents direct interaction of the client with the server, thereby reducing access to unauthorized data. While talking about disadvantages, we are having 4 disadvantages. First one is more complex. Yes, it is more complexer in comparison to 2-tier architecture. As we can see, in 2-tier architecture, we are not having any application for the server, and in 3-tier architecture, we need application also in the server face. That will be the middle layer. The communication points are also doubled in 3-tier architecture. The next disadvantage is it is difficult to interact because it becomes difficult for the sort of interaction to take place due to the presence of middle layer. Slower response time. Since the request passes through an extra layer, that is an application server, it may take more time to get a response compared to 2-tier systems. Higher cost. Setting up and maintaining 3 separate layers, that is client, server and database, requires more hardware, software and skilled people. This makes it more expensive. I hope through this video you will learn about the database architecture and its designs. Thank you for watching. Keep learning.